I want to talk about Jesus, but I want to talk about parenting, and I want to talk about being a father, and I want to talk about how being a leader in your home is not toxic. Because if we as men did more of that, our homes would be happier.
Welcome, Charles. It's my pleasure to have you here this morning on From the Heart, Conservative American Woman podcast. You are a house parent with Sunshine Acres, and that's one of the reasons that I brought you here today to talk about family. So, welcome, Charles.
Yes, ma'am. My wife and I have been fostering for 19 and a half years. We have been at Sunshine Acres for 11 and a half years. And we've worked for the state, we've worked for different organizations, and I'm just a blood-bought child, prodigal child of the King. And I didn't get saved until late in life. And God has used me in ways that I would have never, ever picked for myself. And one of those being working with kids. I didn't like kids, kids didn't like me. And I have absolutely loved finding my purpose, and that was helping kids and helping restore the family.
One thing that I think we found in common right away on TikTok also is I have worked with kids also, and I'll bring that up at another point, but just the fact that we have in common, for me, it was working in juvenile detention, the kids who needed more care than the kids over at Sunshine Acres, which I'm sure Charles will tell us more about. But that was one of the early reasons why we were able to connect. So what led you into this career? I know you said that you didn't think all that much about kids in the beginning, but you eventually got there. What brought you from where you were before to I'm going to work with kids? You and your wife. And what's your wife's name?
Yeah. My wife's name is Michelle.
Okay.
Um, oh my gosh. I was running restaurants in Colorado. I was doing everything that the world said that I needed to do to be happy. And for a couple of years, God and I kind of fought and had different conversations about what it was that I was going to do and how I was going to trust Him. It was like turning the Titanic. It took a little while for God to get my attention. And then when I turned 33, I had a really, really hard night. A lot of crazy things happened in my world for my birthday. And I just came home and I was sitting at the bar and the bartender leaned over and gave me a kiss on my cheek. And she looked at me and she said, "I love you, brother." She goes, "But if you don't leave here," she's like, "you're not going to make it." And I went home and I got on my knees and I told God that if He was really real, to do something with my life. And He said, "Move back to Arizona." And I said, "No, I don't want to move back to Arizona. Arizona's hot and I don't really like Arizona. So, no, I don't really want to do that." And the next morning, I was packing a small bag and I was going to come visit my parents who live here in Arizona. And my father and I had both been recently decided that we were going to trust God and that we were going to submit to what He wanted us to do. And my dad and I made up for everything real and everything imagined that we had against each other.
So there was some tension between the two of you when you were gone in Colorado. So coming back home involved kind of making some repairs, it sounds like.
Yes, ma'am. I was not an I don't know, I don't if you can believe this or not, but I was not an easy child. And I definitely wasn't an easy teenager. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had PTSD and I was in a really bad place and I didn't think anybody could help me.
Where did it lead next?
So I was running restaurants in Colorado. It's what I had known. So I started applying for restaurants and jobs and they started turning me down or I turned them down. And we were listening to Family Life Radio and they were talking about needing guys to come out and work with kids at this camp at Youth Haven Ranch. And my dad looked at me and goes, "You should go do that." And I was like, "Nobody wants me working with kids." I was like, "That's a bad idea. I don't like kids. Kids don't like me. It's not a good idea." And The next day, I filled out an application and I was like, I'm going to show God and I'm going to show my dad that neither one of them know what they're talking about. And so, like, I was bluntly honest. I'm filling this out and I'm talking to this guy. And it was the first time I'd ever written my testimony down. And the next day, this man calls me back and he goes, "You're exactly what I've been praying for." And I was like, "Wait, what?" I was like, I've known Jesus for like a month and a half. Um, like there, I'm not the guy. And he goes, "No, no." He goes, "I get all these college kids who know who Jesus is, but they don't have your life experience." He goes, "You know these kids." And so I went out and worked a weekend for free. And he put me with 6 12-year-old boys. And I had this lady who I was technically supposed to be helping her, and she was going to run the thing. Within 15 minutes, she looked at me. She goes, "We're going to switch." She goes, "You're going to run the program, and I'm going to help you." And so I taught archery to the boys. We played dodgeball. We sat in these great big covered wagons and shared stories and talked about our lives. And one of the boys accepted Christ. And I was hooked. And I
That's
went
incredible.
back into the guy's office the next day and I was like, "Hey, I want to do this job." And he smiled at me and he goes, "I knew you were supposed to be here."
I love it. There's nothing like someone saying that you are an answer to their prayer. How long did you stay there?
I went there in 2005. The summer of 2005, I met my wife. She was a camp counselor there as well.
A
And,
perfect reason for
well,
you to have been there.
for the first time in my life, I wanted to be friends with someone of the opposite sex. I actually wanted to know who she was, not just know her enough to get her to go out on a date with me, but I wanted to know who she was. And we spent time in Bible study together. We spent time hanging out and going to movies. I think for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to hit on somebody. And as a guy, that was a very, I mean, that's what the world tells you you're supposed to do all the
Right?
time.
Right?
And a couple months later, I met her family. She had met mine, and I asked her to marry me. And her grandmother, who just recently passed away, her grandmother said, "So you want to marry my granddaughter?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Well, how are you going to take care of my granddaughter? Are you going to go back to running restaurants?" And I smiled at her. I said, I'm not going to take care of your granddaughter. I said, "We're going to take care of God's kids, and God's going to take care of us." And she smiled at me and she patted my knee and she goes, "Oh, honey, we all work for Jesus, but what are you going to do for a job?" And I said, "I'm going to stay at the camp until God moves us somewhere else." And she's going to teach across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're going to do. And I think everybody was really floored because my family, her family, everybody expected us to just get back into the business world. And I kept trying to explain to everybody that this was no longer going to be about money. This was going to be about taking care of God's kids. And that's what we were going to do.
It's a calling for you, not just a career. And I think I kind of knew that anyway, but
Yes,
that's what
ma'am.
I'm hearing.
I believe I found my purpose. I finally found what it was that I was supposed to do and who it was that I was supposed to be.
So what continues to drive that passion?
The passion behind it is because we are supposed to be the hands and feet of Christ. We've been doing this for almost 20 years. There's not enough men who are willing to do what it is that I do. There's not enough men that are willing to jump into the fray, get dirty, have these kids who have been through unspeakable things. The kids at the camp, they still call me. They still message me. They find me on TikTok. I have seen one of them I hadn't seen in 10 years. And he found me on TikTok and came across one of my lives and stopped and was like, "Coach, that's you?" And it was just I want to have an impact on men because the world tells us that we're supposed to sit down, shut up, and not do anything anymore. And that if we talk too much, we get our words used against us. And I want to contradict that. I want to show people that if we are man enough to trust that what we're saying is the right thing and that we're glorifying God's kingdom, that He'll take care of everything else. And we went from the camp to a place called Gap Ministries down in Tucson.
Okay.
They used to bring kids up to us. And the lady who runs it, her and her husband, she grabbed my wife and I, and she goes, "Oh, so you guys have been married for a year now?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "We want you to come run a house." And so we went down and interviewed and talked to them. And we did it for 22 months. I loved working with the kids, but I spent more time at the courthouse fighting with the system about how they help our children. We had just had our first biological child, and we decided it was time to go back to the camp. They called and they wanted me to come back and run it. And so I was the program director at this point, and it just seemed like a better fit for us. And so we did that for about 2 years. And then I took the summer off, and we had my second child. And I spent the summer just with my two boys. We had enough money in savings. My wife was summer school teaching, and she's like, "I just want you to spend time with the boys." She goes, "You're never, ever going to have this chance again. And as much as you pour into everybody else," she's like, "you need to pour into your sons."
That's why.
And she's amazing.
Is that where the handle that you have on TikTok comes from, Raising Boys?
No, it comes from the job that we currently have because where
Okay.
we're at now, I have 12 sons and I have two biological and 10 bonus. The 10 bonus change, but that was where Raising Boys came. If I had just put Charles on TikTok, there's about 700 million of them. And
Right.
Raising Boys tends to get a little more attention. That's how I got involved on TikTok. I went in to check on the boys in October, and I had six friends, and all of them were my children. And I ended up in a live, and I met a guy named True Lion, and he saw my handle, and he goes, "Raising Boys." He goes, "I'm a football coach." He goes, "What's this all about?"
Right.
And so he brought me up on the panel, and we started talking. And ironically enough, we had started having conversations about being fathers and about being husbands and what that looked like. And then we had a lot of the liberal ideology come in and just start attacking us because how dare a Hispanic male and a black male want to talk about family and want to talk about wholeness of children and wives and what that looks like. And so we spent about an hour and a half that first day arguing with people literally about family and why the family unit was important.
See, I knew that was the topic for you. There's any number of topics we could have gone with for what you do, but when I was thinking, okay, how do I write the questions for Charles? I thought, the heart of it, the real heart of it, if you're trying to help these kids, is the family and making the family better in society, making it stronger so that these kids have the resources and support that they need. What kind of philosophy goes into that that you could share with listeners that they might be able to use to help them strengthen their own home? Because you have to kind of like strengthen your own home first and then strengthen society.
So at home, what I challenge the boys is that I want them to be better fathers, husbands, and God chasers than their biologicals or that I am. And we challenge in the way of almost like a sports metaphor of how do you want to get where you're going? And if you do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity.
Right.
So we have to have a timeline, we have to have a pattern, and we have to have a desire for change. And when the boys very first come, we use a lot of love and logic. We give a lot of choices. because I've learned that although the Marine in me would really, really just like to tell them what to do and have them listen, it doesn't make sense. They will listen to the coach in me because they don't want to get in trouble. But if I can give them choices about what kind of men they want to become and what kind of boys that they want to walk into the room as, it has to do with choice. And it's simple things when they're little. It's, well, do you want to clean your room now when everybody else is doing it, or do you want to do it while everybody else is watching TV? And it's amazing, but it follows through with everything. For their grades, they have to have C's and better to be able to play video games or have their phones if they're teenagers. For the littles, they don't get to play video games until they're in junior high. The brain function is um, is something that we try really hard to pay attention to. And little boys just don't need to play video games, in my opinion,
So
at
you
all.
limit the screen time until they're at a certain age where it's not as much of an impact on their brain development, basically.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I like that you give them choices because it helps them. It's kind of logical. Do I really want to be cleaning my room? It's not, am I going to clean my room, but when am I going to clean my room? And
Right.
yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what Sunshine Acres specifically is like and the home and the family that you have?
Okay. So Sunshine Acres started 71 years ago. They prayed for 17 years for Sunshine Acres to happen, this pastor and his wife. I don't know anybody who prays for a year for something to happen anymore. The fact that they prayed for as long as they did, they agreed when they started this place that they would not ask for a brick or a buck. So we don't accept any government funding. We do tours, 10:30, 12:30, and 2:30 that you can call the office and check on.
Okay.
And they do a tour and they show people what it is that we do and how we take care of our kids. We don't build a home for children until we have all the funds there to build the home. So they don't owe anybody any money, which means they can take better care of their staff, they can take better care of the kids, and we're not in debt. So we're not put in positions where we have to look for handouts or that we have to try to do things. The great grandparents have passed on, but the grandmother is in her 80s now, and she's still the CEO. And Aunt Carol has the most amazing heart. When we came almost 12 years ago to take a tour, we we showed up and the lady said, she goes, there were supposed to be 27 of you on the tour. And she goes, the entire tour canceled except for you two. And my wife and I just kind of smiled at each other and we were like, okay, God, what are you doing?
Right.
So we got this little intimate tour of the place
Uh-huh.
and she's explaining all of this. They do horse therapy, they have a 4-H program, all of these amazing things. So we got to ask some more intimate questions because we'd obviously worked for Gap down in Tucson. And so we knew the kind of questions to ask. And when we get back up to the office, this lady says, well, I want you to meet Aunt Carol. And so Aunt Carol comes out, and back then she was in her late 60s. And um, she says, Charles, she goes, you're an answer to prayer. And she said the same thing to me that my buddy Kyle said when I started working at Youth Haven. And I had never heard that again. And so for me, it was like, oh, okay, God. And so she said, you need to go quit your job and you need to come work here. And so we kind of chuckled and we left and we prayed about it. And the next morning, I went into Canyon State and I had some issues there. I actually got written up because I didn't restrain enough kids in my cottage.
Oh, yeah.
And that was an issue for me. So I called back And I said, was she serious about the job?
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, you have to have your fingerprint clearance card. You got to do all these background things. It takes a couple of months. And I said, well, because we've worked with the state and I currently work for the state at Canyon State. I have my fingerprint clearance card level one. I have, and I went through the litany of stuff and he goes, well, all we have to do is double check that all of that works. He goes, you need to come in for a formal interview, but you can totally come work. And so we went in, we sat with everybody. We loved everybody here. And 2 weeks later, I had given my notice to Canyon State and we were here.
That's an incredible
Um,
story. I mean, my heart is just so full hearing that you've kind of not only been guided or led upon a path, but you've followed and you've answered. And you've got this sense about you to be open to promptings of where should I go, Lord? I'll go where you want me to go. I love it. So you're there now and your home life. What's the Lucero home all about? I've seen a tour of it on video on TikTok, but since I'm not there
yes,
and I
ma'am.
don't have the video camera to show everybody, if you could just kind of tell us, and I'm not just talking about what it looks like, but kind of what's a day in the life of being a house parent with 12. I mean, I raised 5 kids, but I can't imagine 12.
It's amazing. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I start waking the first one up because oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the movie. There's an Adam Sandler movie where he goes in and he wakes his kids up and he says, "You don't have to get up yet, but you have to start waking up."
Okay.
And so I do that. I go in, I turn on the hallway lights, I start nudging everybody in that direction. I go get my coffee, I do my devotion. While I'm sipping my coffee, I walk back through and, okay, you got to start thinking about getting up. And that way, by 6 o'clock, when I start telling them that they need to get up and ready for school, it's not that jolt awake, oh my gosh kind of thing. And we go from 6 o'clock in the morning till the last kid goes to school at 9, where it's the regular humdrum of food, making beds, fighting over backpacks, where's my shoes, the litany of stuff. We
Sure.
have to be down at the front for the buses. And if you're not on time for the bus, then you have to drive them to school. We come back. My last one, my biological, goes to school at 9 at the junior high. So we drive him. And then we come back. My wife and I typically take the dogs for a walk, reconvene with each other about what's going on, make sure we're on the same page. And then we come back and we clean the house for an hour, hour and a half. We mop, we make beds, we make it we're ready because the kids have chores, but let's be honest, kids don't clean very well. And so our job, we look at it this way. My job that I get paid a paycheck to do is to clean the house.
Okay.
My ministry is to take care of the kids. And if I look at it from that angle, I get paid quite a bit of money to clean the house.
When you put it that way, I absolutely agree.
I mean, if I was in Japan and I had an hour a day to talk to kids about Jesus and the rest of the time I was cleaning bathrooms, and that's what God called me to do, I would do it. It's a little different, but it's the same principle.
So they're all in school.
So I'll go to school, we clean. If we have a dentist appointment, a doctor's appointment, a therapy appointment, all of my boys go to therapy. My biological and my bonus. Everybody goes to therapy because we all need somebody to talk to. And as teenagers, I know that if I would have had somebody to talk to back in the day, I wouldn't have gone through half of the things that I went through. This way, you learn how to communicate, you learn how to share your feelings, you learn how to process with somebody who's not attacking you, but helping you. And that avails you the opportunity to be able to trust more people.
So that's something that you recommend to families everywhere, if they can set something up for their kids, give them a place where they can talk. I mean, you want them to have communication with you, but it's good for them to have another outlet where they can kind of figure things out.
Well, the goal is that if stuff happens, I don't want it to go, oh crap, dad's going to find out I need to hide this from him. I want it to be, oh crap, this happened. I need to go talk to dad. But the reality is, when they hit that testosterone stage, I'm not the guy that they want to come talk to.
Right.
And if they've been going to counseling since they were little and talking about their feelings and making the heart and head connections, then they're more willing to have those conversations with me or with their therapist about why. And what I've noticed is the kids that we've had since they were little, they need to go to therapy like once or twice every other month. The kids that we get that are teenagers, they have to go to therapy every week. But when they were little and they got to go to therapy, they learned to start processing things in such a way. For the first, up until about 3 years ago, both of my boys were homeschooled. Because we had Wednesdays and Thursdays off, it made more sense to homeschool them so that on our days off, we could go up to the mountains, we could drive up to Flag and go snowboarding, we could go do all of those really cool things. Because the last thing I want to do is sit in therapy when my boys are in their 20s and be like, well, you love those other kids more than you love me.
How do the boys feel when there's two of them and then these 10 other kids? How do you balance that?
So, my biologicals, at the end of every summer, we ask, okay, why are we here? Are we still a team? It's the four of us in ministry helping these kids who don't have a family. And my boys, since 3 and 5, have been able to say, yes, we're here because this is what we do as a family. They are 100% bought in. They also have their own bedrooms because we have a 3-bedroom apartment. So
Mm-hmm.
they can come hide on their side when they don't want to be around everybody else. And they can just have their chill out time. But when
Sure.
we're off for 5 days with our other church, we're going to go to Mexico. We're going to drive down to Rocky Point and we're going to go build houses, me and my 2 boys.
Oh, how fun.
And so we're going to go do missionary work. Even though we are full-time missionaries, we're going to go do a different missionary work, just the three of us with our church, just because I want them to have that experience as well.
Sure. So it's a service mission.
Yes, ma'am.
Your own boys are probably learning just as much, if not more, from this experience of how to treat others around them and giving service in more ways than one.
They're learning how to set boundaries. And as people, period, but as men, I don't think we really understand how to set boundaries. We either bring people in or we cut them off, but we don't ever learn how to set boundaries. And I think that that's why it's so important with my sons, with all 12 of them, we have conversations about boundaries. If we learn how to set boundaries and hold those things, we teach people how to treat us, but we teach ourselves how to treat ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we start to do that, our self esteem starts to rise. Who we are and who we want in our life starts to change. And we gravitate people towards us who want the same things. I'm also a gentle parent. Every once in a while, the Marine in me has to come out and it has to be dad's way, period. But when I'm a gentle parent, it's, hey, you made this mistake. You're failing this class. You don't get to play video games. It doesn't have to be this. It just needs to be understanding, compassion, and empathy. There's still the consequences there. And I think that's what we get away from is people think that gentle parenting is permissive parenting, and that's not the case. Gentle parenting in some senses is harder because if my boys do something and they're grounded for a month, I have to have that conversation over and over again. Versus if I'm just this way about it, It's just harsher. And then they can focus on my anger or my irritation versus what they did wrong. And so they're not learning the lesson.
That's really insightful. So they go to their therapy and then,
There's days where we don't have anything. And there's days where my wife and I go to the gym or we go do TikTok or we go do whatever it is that we do. And then about 3 o'clock, the boys start coming home. I'll make cookies. She'll put out snacks. We do homework time. We've also learned to have room time. When they very first come home from school, whether it's a teenager or a little, when they come home from school, they go into their rooms and they clean their closets, reset their footwear, do these little things because when they have to organize their rooms, they organize in their head and you watch them come down. And that way, when you start snack time and you start homework time, it's not utter chaos. They're actually regulated and they're self regulated because they learned how to clean their own room.
I've never looked at it that way before, but that makes a lot of sense. And then I guess we're coming up on dinner time, homework, and all that good stuff.
When I worked at Gap, I had to go buy the food, I had to make the food, I had to do all of that. Here, we have a chef who makes me breakfast. I go down, I pick it up, and I bring it up and I give it to the boys. For dinner time, Monday through Friday, I actually get to take the boys down there. We have a team. They make us our food. We feed the kids. They get to see, like, some of the kids have siblings that are in other houses. And because they're parentified or they have different issues, they have to be separated.
Okay.
So we all go to dinner together. We all go to playground together. And we start to learn how to mend those issues and those relationships so that they're better.
You're just living your life, and at the same time, all these good things are happening, and you're able to provide for yourself.
Yeah, well, and that's it. It's my wife is phenomenal when it comes to our budget. We don't owe anybody any money. So the money that we have is actually ours. We actually get to do the things that we want to do. We got to take a vacation and we went to Hawaii, and my youngest and I swam with sharks. And we got to make memories with them and do some really cool stuff. And I think that's part of why the whole TikTok experience started was I started coaching dads a couple of years ago. I would run into a guy at the grocery store and he would watch me with boys that clearly weren't mine, whether it was the melanin in their skin or just different body appearances, you could tell that they were not my children.
Sure.
And so I would get questions, and I had one dad say, "What do you do?" And so I explained to him, and I said, "And I also coach." And he goes, "So you could help me with my kids?" And I smiled at him and said, "Well, I can help you with yourself." And so this guy in particular, I coached him for about 6 weeks. We helped him learn how to have some boundaries with himself. He was playing too many video games and he couldn't understand why his wife was always chirping at him. He was doing it to self regulate and he was doing it to kind of just breathe and decompress. But when I explained to him, if you actually walk in the house, look at your wife and go, "Hey, you have me for 10 minutes. What do you need? How can I help contribute to the house?" "Oh, the trash needs taken out. These things need done." "Okay, what else can I do? How are you?" I said, "You would be amazed at what a half an hour of you walking in, setting everything from work aside, sitting down with your wife, sitting down with your children, suddenly everybody's regulated, and then you can go play video games for an hour so that you can have your time." But if you walk in, throw your hand up and be like, "I can't talk to anybody, I had a rough day at work," and you go storming off, you're acting like a teenager. You're not acting like a father. And so we're able to have some of these conversations. It took him a couple of weeks and he started to understand and be able to put those into perspective. And suddenly his relationship with his wife was phenomenal. And suddenly his relationship with his teenage daughter and younger son was awesome. he was super thrilled. And he's like, okay, but I want to still do coaching with you, but I don't. And I was like, no, no, no. My job is to get out of coaching. I don't want to take your money. What I want to do is help you become a successful father. What I learned was if I don't charge you a little bit, you don't have any skin in the game. And then you blow me off after I've spent time preparing for you. And
True.
that's what I don't want to do. And so then the TikTok experience started because we raise boys. But the only thing that I wish that my job could do differently, whether it was Gap or Canyon State or here or Youth Haven, is we do a phenomenal job in the different areas that we are of training the boys and the kids how they're supposed to become, what they're supposed to become. Some of it works and some of it doesn't. And the reason is we take them for a year or 2 years and we pour all of this foundation into them, but their foundations are cracked. And then we send them back to the La Brea tar pits where nobody changed where they came from. And then we wonder why these teenagers, why these children are suddenly back in their old habits and back in their old things. And it's because of where they came from. So the TikTok experience started because I want to talk about Jesus because he's the foundation that needs to fill in all those cracks. But I want to talk about parenting and I want to talk about being a father and I want to talk about how being a leader in your home is not toxic and how being a man who actually walks into his house and goes, hey, how can I contribute to my home? Not, oh, I'm going to do my part. No, it's your home. Come in. Oh, the trash needs taken out. Take out the trash. She shouldn't have to tell you that. You can tell that it's full. Walk in and look at her and go, oh, hey, you're dysregulated. Sit down. What are you doing? Let me do it. Because if we as men did more of that for our wives, our homes would be happier. Our marital relations would be happier. And our children would see harmony. And so they wouldn't be trying to work the system against one against the other to try to do the things that they want. If we can teach men how to lead again the proper way, we can teach women how to submit. And by that, it's more not being in their masculine energy because they've learned how to have to be that because their husbands are acting like little boys. We need their husbands to act like men so that women can submit and be who it is that they're supposed to be. If we look at the yin and the yang, that's how I look at marriage. It should be both of us being equally parts of who we are. At the end of the day, if we're having a hard conversation and my wife and I can't agree on something, I have to make the hard decision. But I would be a complete fool to not listen to the brain and the wisdom that my wife has. And if I can help her by doing what it is that she's asking, and I can listen to her, she feels heard, even if I don't make the decision that she wants me to make. I can also explain myself because I've learned how to have boundaries that are appropriate and I understand how to explain myself without feeling like I have to defend myself. And there's a huge difference with that. We try to
Yeah.
role model that for all 12 of our boys. But what I would really, really love to do is to be able to go into a church or go into a school and say, hey, give me your top 5 hardest families. Let's work on teaching them some love and logic so that they know how to have conversations with their children so that they're not just screaming and yelling at them when they do the wrong thing because they're dysregulated. So now they're making their kids dysregulated. Let's teach them some financial peace so that they understand how to manage their money. You and I got taught in marketing class and in DECA in school. And then whether they're married or not, we need to do some marriage counseling. We need to teach them how to have arguments without going out and getting drunk and fighting with each other, without slamming and breaking things, and without being in a defensive posture. Actually, working on it's us against the problem instead of us against each other. And then I believe that men, especially, but men and women, need to go to counseling to work on their past traumas so that they're not bleeding all over their families and the people that they meet now over stuff that hurt them a long time ago. And I think if we could start with those four pillars, we would watch our society change back into an even better than what it used to be as we become more aware of traumas and triggers and all of those things. Being able to actually learn those things and put them into practice. And my favorite statement to the boys is, that's great that you can tell me that that's your trigger, but you sitting in that is like sitting in a poopy diaper and expecting not to get a rash. You have to be willing to change the diaper and go, okay, that triggered me. Why did that trigger me? Let's learn how not to let that trigger me. And it feels like the world is in this place where it just wants to let you be triggered and nobody can say anything to you because that triggers you. Well, that's not trauma informed behavior at all. It's just a trauma informed excuse.
So you've given some really good advice and you've told us some success stories, but what has been one of the biggest challenges that you've had as you've gone through this experience and how did you overcome it?
The greatest challenge was learning how to communicate effectively because the entire time my wife and I have been married has been in ministry. So it's been in one fishbowl or another. And we didn't always communicate the way that we needed to have conversations. We go to marriage counseling every 2 years because we know that we need it. And you take your car in for maintenance regularly because it needs it. You don't wait until it's broken down to do that, or it's a lot more expensive. That's probably my biggest challenge. My wife, she's probably the strongest willed woman I've ever met in my life. And I know that when I'm on my game and I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do as the leader of the home, we're good. When I'm off my game and I'm not leading the way that we're supposed to, it's very evident.
How did you learn to be the leader?
Because we've watched it. I think that's probably been the best part for us is we've watched it. We get children that come into our home that got raised by a mom who she shows up with a 12-year-old boy who is hit that testosterone peak and he doesn't want to listen to her anymore and he needs a dad to be rough and tumble with him and to challenge him to do things and tell him no and to do things that a mom just isn't built to do. Moms are built to love and to adore and to do all the mom things that they're supposed to do.
Nurturing comes to
Yeah.
mind.
If mom's able to nurture the right way, instead of having to parent both the father side and the mother side, it's amazing what her relationship looks like with her son or her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why God created it, man and woman, to have a family and to lead, because it's, again, it's that yin and that yang. The more that we try to push away from that and we don't need each other and we don't need this or we don't need that, we're actually stealing from our children and our grandchildren and we're setting them up for failure.
There's been an attack on the family in recent years coming from all directions, some of it subtle, some of it not so subtle. And the impact that it has on individual kids, on society, all of those things. I think we're starting to see enough of that now that people are starting to push back. How important is it that the family becomes front and center again, that we start paying attention to what our kids need, how to build the family and rebuild society?
I think that if we start with our communities and we start to go out and meet our neighbors again, like you and I used to when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that starts to help things. I think if we start to go, okay, hey, how do we hold our children accountable? How do we hold each other accountable? Nobody wants to be told what to do anymore. And That's the biggest lie that we've gotten told. Everything has a consequence. And if we would work on our communities, like specifically, I grew up in the south side of Tucson. I can tell you more gang activity, more drug activity, more any of that, that we never once said, hey, don't do that. But if we got pulled over by a cop because we look like so and so who was dealing down the street, we were mad at the cop because we look like so and so versus being mad at so and so. And I
Okay.
think that if we would teach people, if we could bring the family unit back to being the center, just to touch on it, the reasons that we had the Leah Thompson deciding to swim against Riley Gaines, I think if you look at that, he didn't have a father in the house that was doing the things he was supposed to do. So he didn't want to be a man anymore because it was easier to be in the feminine energy like his mom. I think that we do a disservice when we teach people that they are not who God made them to be. And I think we could take the family unit, make the man the patriarch that he's supposed to be again, and lead the way he's supposed to. We've tried it for the last 2 decades where the men have slowly been swept out, not held accountable, not asked to do anything, where the women are like, I can do it all without a man. And look at where we are as a society. It takes both of us to raise children. My favorite thing, I've gotten to marry a couple of my kids and their spouses. I got ordained so that I could do that.
Okay.
Um, but one of my biggest things that I tell them that I got told was God's going to use your spouse as a chisel or a battering ram. You get to decide which one of those things that he's going to use by the way that you make your choices because he's after your heart. He's not after a clean heart. He's after a cleansed heart because a cleansed heart he can use to glorify his kingdom. And that is our entire purpose of being on this world is to glorify our creator. And when we don't do that, we have this huge hole in us that we're expecting everybody else and everything else to fill. And it just doesn't work.
So, in that perfect world, what would home and family life look like?
In a world where we're healthier, I think it's when mom and dad actually can hold themselves accountable for their stuff, where they can work on the problem together as a unit instead of it being them against each other, it's them against the problem. And I think that would help our children to be able to grow up and actually be able to be children. What I watch too much of is that children have to grow up to be teenagers or grow up to be adults so fast that they spend the rest of their life trying to live like children because they never got to be kids.
That makes a lot of sense. That's insightful. Is there anything that I have not asked you that you want to add before we sign off?
I am raising boys 1776 on every platform that you can think of. I need 13 more followers on YouTube before I can go live on YouTube. And I am going to start going live with parenting topics, with marriage topics, with dad topics on all platforms. And then on Wednesdays on TikTok, on Raising Boys, #1, um, we're doing something different from every other church. We share testimonies and we sing worship songs for 12 hours from 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, Mountain Time. And we've never seen another church do that. We've never seen a church that actually just has different people come up and share their encounter with Christ that they couldn't walk away from. And last time we had over 6,000 people come, almost 6,000 people come through. So please join us. Come take a look at what we're doing and tell me what we're doing good. Tell me what we should fix. But come and join us.
Well, thank you for coming and speaking with us today, Charles. I will post information about the things that we discussed today in case people want to learn more about you, more about Sunshine Acres, more about the social media accounts that you have. Thank you so much for sharing not only your testimony, but your feelings on the family and how we can, as individuals, influence community to help build families, to help build society, and get this ship back on track.
Yes, ma'am. It's been my
Uh,
pleasure. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today for From the Heart, Voice of a Conservative American Woman. Find us online at www.conservativeamericanwoman.com and anywhere your favorite podcasts are available. See you next time.